How's it going, everybody? Welcome to another Saturday discussion. I am your, I guess, facilitator. I won't say host, but Jay. And we have a new language kind of introduction coming in today. For those that are watching on the public stream, there is an actual Q&A. If you have any questions, be sure to ask them. And either I or someone in the group will be happy to ask them for you. We have Kaya Thomas, who is from New York, but on the West Coast, the best coast. She's here to celebrate the Dr. Dre album release, I guess, or who knows what she's doing. But she's going to actually give us an introduction to Swift. And for those that don't know, Swift is the programming language of choice, along with Objective-C for iOS development. I think those are the only two options at this point. But without further ado, I'm going to pass the floor over to you, Kaya.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Give you a little bit of background about me. I started doing iOS development a little over a year ago. I launched my first application last summer. It's called We Read 2. It's a book resource application that features hundreds of children's and young adult books, all written by authors of color. And last summer I worked at Time Inc. I was doing iOS development with Entertainment Weekly, and then this summer I'm working at Intuit, and I'm working on the Mint iOS app. So that's a little bit background about me and what I've been doing. And so so first off, to get started is what you'll need if you want to follow along for a code. You'll need to download Xcode if you need a MacBook to have Xcode, and if not, I will also at the end link to Dropbox so that everyone can see the code for themselves afterwards and play around with it if they need to. Let's go ahead and do a screen share. Okay. Screen share for Hangout.
And Xcode is available through the Mac App Store, correct? Is that the only way to download it, or?
Yes, that's the only way to download it.
Okay.
And it takes about 2.5 hours, even with a great internet connection.
Yes, it does.
3 or 4 restarts.
Okay. All right. So now, can everyone see my screen?
Actually, I cannot. I can only see. There we go.
Okay. Awesome. So if you have Xcode downloaded, you'll see. Actually, we'll do it from the very beginning. So with that. So then you'll click Xcode and you'll see this, right? It'll say welcome and give you 3 different options. So you're going to want to create a new Xcode project. So I'll explain the difference. A playground, what Apple did, which is something that's really cool and different than what they did before, is now with Swift you can have a playground, which allows you to just type in code and it will automatically compile it for you on the side and show you what your variables have in them, or if you programmatically make some kind of user interface, it'll show up automatically. So it's just a really cool way to just kind of play around with Swift and then just see what you're actually doing. But a project in itself is an application. So a playground is more just for learning and just testing things out, and a project is for creating an actual application. So here in Xcode, there are different options, right, to create an application. You can do a Mac application, a library, or anything like that. We're going to do an iOS application. And the different options are here. Master detail application. So a master detail application is just when you have, let's say you have a source of data, so like a table or a list, and then you click on one of the cells in the table or something on the list, and then it will bring you to a detailed view about whatever that part of the list was, right? And that's what the master detail application is. So it just allows you to automatically have that set up, think of like a wireframe. It allows you to already have that, and then you just have to kind of plug in what you want it to look like and what kind of data that you want in there. Page-based application will be if you want to swipe between pages. So you'll probably see this in a lot of tutorials. So when you go on an application, they say, oh, do you want to do a tutorial? and then you'll see you can swipe between a couple of different pages where they'll have, different views to show you what the app does, etc. Single view, which is what we're going to be doing, is literally just one view that has nothing on it. It's kind of like a blank slate, and that's how we're going to get started. And tabs application is just when you have a tab menu at the bottom, and you can just switch between those different tabs, and that will bring you to the different views. And then game, of course, is a game. Okay.
So, quick question. How easy is it to, let's say you start out with a single view application and then you discover, okay, I might need to maybe make this a master detail or make this page-based. How easy is it to transfer from one application type to another?
Luckily, it's very simple. You cannot actually transfer it, but I'll show you this actually now. So after you click single view application, you go to next. So product name will say Code Newbie. Oh, I can't spell. Code Newbie, right? And it'll just ask you for, what language. We're going to put it in Swift. iPhone, next. This is actually where you want to put it. Great. So the great part over here, now if you look, I'm going to bring this all the way up over here on the side, so you'll see where my scroller is. These are basically all the UI components that you can add to your application. And the great part is, if you feel like you messed up, if you actually needed a master detail or a tab or page, you can easily just drag. So you're going to click on main storyboard. Storyboard is basically the way to see, what your app would actually look like, right? To actually design the UI at the same time when you're programming. So you can literally just drag. So let's say we thought that we want to do a page view instead. You can actually just go ahead and drag the page view controller right in here. And so there you have your page view controller, and you can, start fresh from there. So let's go ahead and delete that. So as you can see, this looks huge, and this is not how an iPhone actually looks, right? So we're going to go, let's move this down here. Okay. So we're going to go and look to see how we can resize this. We're going to click on, okay, so you're going to go here to this little folder, the file inspector, and you're going to uncheck use size classes. So automatically what Apple does is when you create this application, it will use this general size. That way you can, resize it however you like. But because we know that we're just doing this for iPhone, right? We're not doing it for iPad and stuff like that. We're going to uncheck this and disable this size classes, and so that we get a nice and small iPhone view. Okay. Does anyone have any questions so far? Very good. Awesome. Okay. So now this is our view, right? So this is how Xcode sets it up. And the nice thing about it is that this storyboard allows you to kind of use the GUI to guide your coding. So over here you'll see the view controller scene, right? And it'll show you what's going on here, the different layouts and such. And, an entry point. So this entry point just shows where the application starts at. So if we had another view, we can change that entry point of where we want our application to be. So every application starts out with 2 different files, for Swift at least. For Objective, the nice thing about Swift is you have way less files, because with Objective-C you have a header and an implementation file for every single class that you have. So Swift does it nice and combines them both. So you'll see the app delegate Swift and the view controller. So for the app delegate, this is basically any application will use the app delegate for when you load up the app or when you go outside of the app. So these are the different modes basically that the application can be in. So did finish launching is literally when, as soon as your application comes up, right? Once it finished pops up, and then if you have any special things that you want to do with your application once it pops up, you can put it in there. Did into the background, so that's when you actually just, if you have an iPhone, or I'm not sure how Android works with that, but if you have an iPhone and you click the home button and you go outside of the application, that is in the background. So that means that you're in the background part of the app. And then foreground is, we'll enter foreground is when you're back up. And so these are just the different modes that your application can be in. And a lot of different applications take advantage of this because they might need to see if you're logged in or if you're logged out and stuff like that. But we are not doing anything like that, so we do not have to mess with the app delegate. The main part of our code, yes.
Okay, so the app delegate, it's kind of the interface with your program. It dictates how your program interacts with the windowing manager on the iPhone.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Exactly. So now we're going to go to view controller. Oh, yes.
So is the entire environment for the way you develop applications more along the lines of like an MVC?
Yes, yes. Oh, I did not.
You've got.
Yep. Everything for iOS for Apple development is MVC, so model view controller. So everything is based off of, you have the window and then you have the view and dealing with the interactions between each other.
Cool.
Okay.
Yep. So the great thing that I like to do is, so over here you have some different options of how you want your setup to look. And so you can easily code and use the GUI at the same time. And the reason why that's important is because with Xcode specifically, the storyboard allows you to easily drag UI components into your code. So there's a lot of auto-completion. So I'll show you an example of that. So we're going to drag a label onto the view here, right? Let's just make this label a little bit bigger. Okay, great. That's our label, right? But right now, we didn't code anything for the label, right? So if we bring up and also when you press the play button, that will build the application for you and bring up the simulator automatically. And it builds pretty fast. So you should see, and it comes up, go newbie. They automatically have the launch screen, which is really nice. And then you just see the label there, right? So that label is not coded. There's no interaction with it, so it just is there. And so you can easily, put in design elements into your application and not have any code interact with it. But in order to have it actually interact with the code itself, you can simply hold the control button on your laptop and drag it into the class. So when you drag it into the class, it will ask you if you want it to be an outlet or a collection. And an outlet just means that you're going to connect this UI element into your actual code, so you can actually change the element and have user interactivity with it. So we're just going to name this hello label. Okay? And then it automatically is connected. And this right here will show you if it's connected to anything or not. So if we disable the connection, you'll see that this would not be filled in, right? But so what we can actually do is right here now, we can say hello label and then change we can really change anything. Let's say we're going to change the text color, and so Xcode has a lot of auto-completion, and the syntax for Swift is very, very simple in that it's similar to Python or JavaScript if you're familiar with any of those languages. So there's no semicolons, luckily, and it's pretty understandable. And anything that you need, you can kind of just look in the drop-down menu to see what's there. Let's actually change this to blue, right? So now when we run the application, we'll see that the label is blue, even though it's black within the storyboard, right? So that's how you connect UI elements to the application. So let's add some interactivity here. We're going to add a text field. Make this a little bit bigger. And a button. Okay. And as you can see, when we run it, once again, they're not connected to anything. So we can use them, right? But there's nothing going on. We didn't add anything to, to connect it or have any interactivity. So let's change that. So first, we're going to do the same thing. You're going to hold Control and drag it right into your class, right? And let's name this text field. Right, and then now that's connected. And then this button, let's rename this to change text. Okay. And then Control. We're going to connect that, and we're going to say change button. And it's automatically connected. Great. So now, even though they're connected, we still haven't done anything. And the great thing, again, about this is now that we have a button, we want actually something to happen when you press the button. So what we're going to do is create an IB action. So an action allows you to, when you touch, when you tap, click, or whatever on the UI element, you can have some interactivity happen within that method. So let's name this tapped button, right? And it automatically creates this method in which the user taps the button, something will happen, right? So let's say we are going to change the label, right, when it happens. So we're going to change the label text to be equal to the text field text. Okay, great. Let's try that out. And there you go. So now you have some interactivity, right, within your application because you created that IB action. Now, are there any questions before I continue?
I had a quick question. On your properties or attributes there, when you created the link, what does the keyword weak mean? I might be getting ahead of things, but just curious.
Yeah. So there are some really complex background things going on with languages like Objective-C and Swift. So you can have a strong or weak variable, and it just depends on really what you're looking for in the application that you're creating, so what you're actually doing with these variables. So in terms of, basically think of it as if you have, what would be the best way to simplify? Think of it as in, this is a tough question actually to try to go back and explain.
I don't mean to
I will.
To mess it up. Yeah, we can go ahead. I can
No. You're not messing anything up. It's actually a really good question. The great thing about it is that if you are doing something really complex, right, most of the time you're actually going to use weakly typed variables. So you don't need to use strong for the most part. But the great thing is usually it will handle it for you. That's actually a downside and an upside to dealing with something with such heavy like auto-completion, like with Xcode, because a lot of the times it will do everything for you. So you don't necessarily have to understand like what's going on in the background unless like you have a very complex application. But it's definitely important to know what's going on in the background. And I will, yeah.
So it's something to do with the typing of the variables?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, I love Vim. I'm all about Vim. But yeah,
I would agree.
yeah. No, that's the only thing. So you can actually, you can actually program the UI, and usually when you're not going to use a storyboard is when you have like a really complex application. So if your application is like has so many different views that it would make no sense to just have a storyboard, because we're going to add some views in next, and I'll show you what I mean by that. But if you have like 10 different views, you don't want to sit there and drag and drop everything and do that. So you're just going to want to like program all the UI, which you can do pretty simply.
Awesome. And also anybody, I know we have a few viewers on the Hangout. If you have any questions, be sure to also ask them inside the Google Questions app,
Yeah,
and we'll be happy to get those answered for you.
yeah, definitely. Okay, great. So we did that. Now let's add in another view. So you can easily go from having the code there or not. And we're going to remove the code for a second just so we can see what's going on over here. Okay. So just going to add in another view controller. But we added another view controller in, and we don't have another file over here. So what we're going to do is create a new file, right? And we're going to X. No. No. You want to go to source, and then you're going to go to Swift file, and then save as second view controller. No, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't get created. So when you add in a new view, you have to manually add in a new file, and then you can connect those files. So now we have this, right? We have our second view controller file, but it's actually not connected to this. So what you're gonna do here is go over here to the view, here to the custom class part, and you're gonna look for your class. So, why is it come up? Second view. Yeah, exactly.
Is there an actual preference to the development style? Is it kind of recommended that you write your code first and then add your views, or how we're kind of doing it now, where we create the object and then we write the code for it, and then we create the next object and write the code for it?
Yeah, I think that would be more standard. I think if you have an application that has a lot of views, then you're definitely probably not going to want to mess around with the storyboard too much, just because it's going to cause you a lot of pain in the end to do this drag and drop um, type of interaction. So the best thing to do is, if you know that you're going to have like a lot of different views in your application, you're going to want to probably just do everything via code without really messing with the GUI part too much. And it's completely possible to do that. But if you're doing a simple application that has, I would say if your application has less than like 6 views, then you're probably fine with doing this drag and drop. And you can really customize the UI in terms of how you want by doing it this way, right? Instead of doing it programmatically. Okay, so now, yeah. So now you'll see that if you ever there's two different types of kind of errors in Xcode. So they'll either give you like a red, exclamation little point button that says like you have an error somewhere, so like your code will not run, or it will tell you this, that something that's a warning, that's something that you should change. Here it's telling us that this view is unreachable, so like the user will never get to this view, right? Because we haven't connected it to anything. So let's change that. So let's add another button. And we're going to say this is go to next view, right? And again, we're going to want to click on this to bring up our other view controller. And drag it in, right? Next view button. Great. But the great part is, when you have fewer views, you can automatically have like a button or, you know, whatever, a label or something. Whenever you tap on something, you can have that just automatically go to the next view by holding Control and dragging it to the next view. And then what will pop up is, say, action seg. So there are different types of segs. You can either have push or modal. So custom, that's if you're like doing some special like animations, etc., and stuff like that. Push just means when you click on it, it's going to push to that next view. Modal is basically if you are doing something where you want it to either pop up and you're doing something where you don't want it to like just go to the next screen, right? And push will allow you for navigation. So if you need to like go back, right? If you want a navigation controller where you go from one view to the next and you have like a back button, push is what you're going to want to do because that will allow you navigation control. So we're going to do push. Right? And then you'll automatically see that connection now, and that warning went away. So you'll see that connection between the two views. So we can run it. Right? Oh, yes. So this is the great the crash system. So when it happens here, you'll see that it will tell you. So actually, I want to go through the debugger because one of, I think, the most powerful things about Xcode is the debugger, right? So whenever you have a crash, right, it will bring you here to the console, right? And now all this stuff is like pretty like confusing. So you're not going to look at that. But it will actually tell you right above why the app is terminating. So this says that it's terminating due to uncaught exception, right? Push segs can only be used when the source controller is managed by an instance of a UI navigation controller. Now, that is what I had just said, that if you're going to use a push, right, you need some type of navigation. But we don't actually have any navigation. But luckily, it's really easy to add. So you can add here the navigation controller. And this comes automatically with a root controller that's a table view, but that's not what we want. So if you look, you'll see you can easily just, if you right click, you'll see it'll bring up, you know, all the connections, any segs that you have in that view. And this says that it's connected, right? Its view controller is this. But we want to change that. So let's go ahead and delete that root view controller. Now we're going to bring our navigation controller over here and connect it, right? And you'll see that this arrow shows that this is the first view. But we're actually going to change that. We don't want that to be the first view anymore. We want our navigation controller to be the initial view controller. So you just go right here in the attributes inspector and then click under title is initial view controller. So now, and it's going to give us another warning and say that our scene is unreachable again, right? So now we're going to control drag and say a relationship seg. So this is not manual, like we're not pushing any buttons, but this is the relationship between the two views. And because it's a navigation controller, it needs a root view controller. So this is going to be the root view controller for that. And now you'll see it brought up a navigation bar, right? And this is so that we can go back and forth between any views that we need. Okay. Any questions?
Not on this topic, but there was a question that was brought up
Okay.
before we go any farther. I think
Yeah.
Jeremy was wanting to know, earlier we turned off compatibility view, which gave us that generic box view, and now we're just looking at an iPhone. Does that cover all iPhones, or like of the multiple sizes, or
Oh,
are we
yeah.
working in a specific?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So, basically how it works, the great thing about Xcode as well, so obviously I love Xcode because I keep saying that, is that it will allow you to simulate any view. So we can actually run it and like try it on a bunch of different views. So let's do that. And so let's run it here on an iPhone 4. And you'll see it kind of replicates that smaller iPhone 4.
So right now you're just developing specifically for iOS. There's no restrictions that have been put in place.
Yep, nope, there's no restrictions. And so we can stop. So this is how it would look on an iPhone 4, right? We can try it on an iPad. Right, and it will bring up the bigger screen to show you, right, to what it would look like on an iPad, right? And so it allows you, it really allows you to really test out on literally all the devices it would be available on, right? There's no iPhone 3GS or whatever, but I don't think anybody uses those at this point. Hopefully, maybe, but hopefully.
Well,
hopefully
I did notice when you started your development path, it asked for like iPhones for devices with iOS 7 or above. So I wonder if you would have, like, if we would have said, okay, for some reason let's develop for like iOS 6, maybe those other options would have been there.
Yeah, so the thing is, depending on which version of Xcode that you use, certain iOS will not be available. So because of the version on Xcode we are on, we can only develop for iOS 7 and above. So you would have to be, so I guess that's kind of a downside, right? So certain older phones won't be able to use certain applications. They just can't download them because they're made on later versions. So you just can't do that.
Okay, and I have noticed before, and I think Jeremy followed up his question with causing resolution issues. I know that in some of the older applications you would have these really strange resolution problems. Is that more of an Objective-C problem versus Swift maybe takes care of that better, or is that just something that we can't see here because we're simulating?
You mean resolution in terms of how the actual like pixels and such look?
Yes.
I mean, I've never experienced resolution issues. I think that's a good question. I think the issues really come out with the iPad. I think that's where it's kind of hard because usually if you develop a iPhone application and you don't specify, so there's a way where you can specify views for the iPad, and if you do not do that, then you will experience resolution issues, and I think that's Swift and Objective-C, just because of when you use the app on the iPad, it will kind of make it look like you're on an iPhone, right? You'll see like just that little view like we did. So it'll do this when I build it. It'll do this, and obviously you can see the resolution is pretty bad. So I think that's why it's best if you know that you're developing an application and you really want it to you really want it to be like high resolution and fit for the iPad, then you should definitely specify some views that so that you can have the specific things that you need for the iPad. Because otherwise, it's kind of tough. Yeah, so you will experience resolution issues even if you have Swift or Objective C.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so now that we have our navigation controller in, we are going to see if we can go to the next view. Oh wait, no, not an iPad, an iPhone. Right, and then it brought us to the second view. Right, so you'll see we can still change the text. Everything will still be working fine. Right, now we just have this extra tab, and it will bring us to a different controller. Now, if you see in the console, it's telling us that there's no class, right, that is SecondViewController. So it's not recognizing the class that we created. So, so the thing that I think, one thing about Objective-C that was really nice is that whenever you have, whenever you have a class that you recreate in Objective-C, it would allow you to kind of get everything from a certain class. So like, let's say you create a new file and you know that it's gonna look like a table view. You can just easily subclass that. But with Swift, there are certain things that are not available anymore because they simplified, right? You don't have the different files. You don't have a implementation and a header file. So some things that you do have to do manually, like this, which is not like that big of a deal, right? We're just doing like a few lines. So now you'll see import, and you have to always make sure you import the right classes so that it will work. So the reason why that little red thing came up was because we didn't have the UI kit imported, and so you need to have UI kit, which will have all the different view controllers and anything like that you need. So now if we save this file and then go back to our storyboard, right, and select class, we should see that SecondViewController is now available. It wasn't available before because SecondViewController wasn't a subclass of the UI view controller. Is that like WatchKit and HomeKit? Similar. So, yeah, it's similar in the fact that if you have the WatchKit, right, there are certain classes and UI elements that you'll need that are specified for the watch, right? Just like UIKit, but even if you're developing for the watch, you're still going to need UIKit because UIKit literally has everything that you will need to develop your user interface for the application. So now when we run it, it won't show us the same error. Right? Wait, what? It's not supposed to show us the same error. Okay. So let's see. Huh. That's weird. Let's see. Let's do a test, right? So we can test to see if this is working, right? Let's have our viewDidLoad method. Like I said, that's the great thing about autofill, right? It will allow us to do whatever we need without thinking about it, kind of. Okay. So now we're going to test. And a way to test is to interact with the console, right? To see if anything is really working. You don't really need to. So let's just do a simple string, right? Hello world. Oh, we don't need any. This is for formatting, right? If you have a variable that you want to print out or anything like that, you can easily add it by just formatting it. If you're familiar with Java or C, that is what you'll do. Python's a little bit different, but in C or Java, if you want to print out something that includes a variable or anything like that, you have to format it with a different formatting. Like you'll do something like this, right? You might do something like this, like I for integer, and then include your variable here, and it will print out whatever your variable is. So this will be a test to see if we're actually interacting with. Yeah, so we are interacting with the with this view. So that just shows us that it's actually working. So I'm not sure why it still bring up the error, but it's actually now still interacting with this view. So the great thing too is with an iPhone application or any type of mobile application, you can actually pass data between views, right? So let's actually do that now. We're going to pass some data between the views. So let's create a label for this view. Okay. And we are going to connect that label right to the view. Just name that label, right? So now that's connected, and what we're going to do is we're going to pass the text that's inside the text field to this view and make it show up on that label. And how do we do that? So we do that by having a prepare for seg method. So what mobile allows you to do, and I haven't done Android, I'm sure Android allows you to do the same, but with iPhone development, you can have a prepare for seg method, which allows that seg that we created, that we manually created, whenever that seg goes through, right, the prepare for seg method will pass any data you need between views. And this is really important because if you have something like a table view or a list view, right, and let's say I have a table of recipe names, right, and I click on that recipe, I want to go to the actual recipe, I want to have that data. So you're able to pass any data you need to between views there. So what we're going to do is create this prepare for seg method. All right. So this is our prepare for seg method here. So this will allow us to pass the data between our views. But what we need to do first is in our storyboard, actually let's have an identifier for this seg. So segs can have identifiers because you might have multiple segs between views, right? So we're going to name this, just go to a view. Right, simple. So identifier will let you, in the code, actually interact and see what's happening between the segs. Right? So now we're going to go back to our view controller and create a conditional statement. So this conditional statement will check to see what the actual identifier is. Oh, somebody asked a question? Oh, okay. So if the seg identifier is equal to, what did we name it? We named it go to view, right? Then we're going to do something, right? So now this just checks to make sure that we're actually passing the correct data between segs, right? You might have multiple different segs in your view, and you want to make sure that you're passing the correct data or doing the correct actions within those segs. So now we're going to say, right, let our next view controller, and the type of is going to be the second view controller, right? Because that's what the next view is. and we're going to let that be the destination view controller. So this allows you to, this basically allows you to, let's bring this out. This will allow you to create what your destination view controller is, and I'll explain that little. I'll have a conversation about that exclamation point that I did. And there's something called optionals in Swift, which is something that I am struggling with because it's something very different than Objective-C. But I'll explain that in one minute. So you'll basically have your destination view controller, which will allow you to interact and pass any data, right? So because we created that label, we'll be able to actually have the text of that label because we created an instance of that view controller. Okay, so yeah. So Swift, so I'll go into optionals now. So this exclamation point. So in Objective-C, right? In Objective-C is a very verbose language in which you have to be very clear about, what you're creating, what types it is, etc. And things just can't like be null or anything like that, right? But in Swift, you have what's called optionals. So optionals allows something to either be null, right, or not. So it's basically an optional variable. It's like saying, okay, you can have something here or you can't, right? It's a very weird concept. That's something I'm still trying to grasp onto, and something they did a little bit differently than in Objective-C. So that's why we had to put that there.
Quick
so
question.
Now we're going to yes.
Is a seg the same thing as an event, or is it a change between two different views? Or maybe an easier question is, what exactly is a seg? I think you're muted.
Yeah, there was a little bit of an echo.
Okay.
Okay, just go and unmute. Uh-oh. I think we broke it. Oh, no, there we go.
Hello?
Oh,
yep, there you go.
Oh, okay, awesome. Okay, great. So a seg is similar to, you can think of it like an event, but the difference is it's basically what happens when those two views change. So like when you go from one view to the next, what needs to happen? Like, is there data you need to pass, or does nothing happen? Okay. It's basically, you can think of it as an event, but it's really kind of the in-between the event, really. So it's kind of what's happening in that in-between stage. Do you need to do anything there?
Okay, so it's kind of like a special kind of event.
Okay, so it's kind of like a special kind of event.
Yeah, exactly. So now we're going to say next view controller label text is going to equal our text field dot text. Awesome. So now let's try this. So we're going to say code newbies rock. And then we're going to go to next view. Oh. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. So we got a error, right? And so actually I want to bring up that error to show you guys a little bit about the debugger here. Right? So now what happens is when you have like a fatal error, like the app will pause and you can't interact with it at all, and like it won't do anything. So usually if this ever happens to you, like when you're actually in a real application, usually the application will just crash, right? I'm sure a lot of you have seen that, like applications crash all the time. So now the debugger here will allow you to, you can print out anything that is relevant to your view. So let's say we want to print out text field, or what do we have here? A label or something. Uh-oh. Well, okay, there was no text in there, right? So it won't show us anything. Or we can print out our hello label. Anything you want to understand, like what the value is, etc., you can print it out. You can also see here, like where the memory is, right? So what the error it gave us is it found nil right here. So the label that we were trying to change the text of doesn't have any memory attached to it. So you'll see here, you can actually go in and you can see where if there's memory attached to it, if there's anything there, right? You can go in and just keep going and see if we can see anything. And it will let you know if something is nil or not. So it's a pretty good debugger, and you could always set breakpoints. So we can set a breakpoint right here or something. Let's say, yeah, so we can set a breakpoint right there. And then what I'll do is when we get there, right, it gets to the breakpoint, right? And then you can dive, you can go next, or you can dive into a function. So you can go into a function. This is right here, right? And you can go out of the function. It's pretty nice. So it allows you to kind of step through step by step, and especially as a new beginner programmer, it's really powerful because it'll allow you to see where the program is going and when, right? So we can go over, and now we see that our program is ended, right? So let's see here, delete. So let's see what happens when we add this as an optional. Okay. So now we're going to go to our second view controller here. Now instead of having a label, we're going to add a variable. So the two different ways to add variables in Swift, you can either have let or you can have var. So let simulates a constant, right? So that means something that will be set and not change. And var is something that will change. So we're going to say var text is going to be a string. So what we're going to do then is in our view did load here, we're going to set the label to whatever our text is. Right? So, oops. Cool. So, all right, great. So whenever you have an error, sometimes errors, they will fix it for you, right? It will tell you what the problem is. The problem with that is what we try to do is set this as an optional and then set it here, but you can't have a label text be set to an optional, right? Because that means that you might not have any text in your label. So what they made us do is basically initialize this variable to be an empty string, and then wrap it here as a string. So in Objective-C, you have there are different types in which some are from C, right, from the C language, and some are specific to Objective-C. And then same thing with Swift now. So now you have an extra level. So now you have certain objects that are relevant to Swift, and then certain objects that are relevant to Objective-C. And a lot of times you're still going to be using the same types of objects that are in Objective-C. So now let's try this. So now instead of label.text, we're going to say .text. Okay, so the error. So it's not recognizing our label here. So let's set another breakpoint, right here. So let's set a breakpoint. We want to see if it's actually, how far it's actually getting, right? So let's say hello, go to next view. So that showed us that it actually broke right before we even got to our view. So let's add another breakpoint over here. Okay, so this is where our code broke, right? So this right here, when we go here, we're saying, okay, text. The label is nil. We're not interacting with the label. And the text is an empty string, just like we said. Okay. So when we go step over, right, and we're going to keep stepping over, and then when I actually try to perform the seg, that is where our crash happened. So let's change this. Let's see. So great. Let's see what happens here. So we're still getting this error, and the error is happening with this label here, with the label in our second view class. So let's see what's wrong with this label. Is the label, our label is connected, right? So let's disconnect this label and see what's going on here. You could also do it the reverse way. So we've been doing it this way, right? But you can also do it the reverse way. So if you can create an outlet right here and then just drag it and connect it to a UI view controller. So are there any questions? Are there any questions so far? Anybody have any questions about anything we've done in the last?
I don't think there are any questions.
I have a quick question. I guess we'll go back to segs. Maybe. Are there any time constraints? Different views? Like maybe.
Is there any what? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry. With the event model, are there any time different views? So like that event that you're coding in there, you did load. Is that's triggering after the object is instantiated? Is there anything you can't do because of timing concerns there? I don't know
timing?
if my question is making much sense.
Oh, okay. So you're saying, is there any like, is there any specific amount of time that the seg happens?
Yeah, like for instance, here you're passing that text into a class or object level variable, and then you're setting it to the caption. Would you? Is the reason that you couldn't set it directly because at the time or something like that?
No. So there's no like time. It's not there's not any time constraints. But what's happening right now is it's saying that the label itself is nil, right? So it's saying that is like a null value, and that's why we're trying to assign something to a null value, and that's the error we're getting here.
Okay.
Right, and it's not recognizing. So when it doesn't recognize something, the most errors that you would get are usually when something is either nil or something is not being recognized. So even when we originally went to our second view controller class, it wasn't actually recognizing it because we hadn't, set it as a subclass of the UI view controller, right? So when it doesn't recognize something, it will give you those errors.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, great. So
Kaya, just to let you know, you do have an echo.
Echo?
Oh, I do?
Yes.
Yes.
Huh. Okay. I don't know how to. Is it like repeating what I'm saying after I say it?
It's repeating any
It's
questions that
repeating
come
any
in.
questions that come in.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's probably. I don't know if that's because of the screen sharing. I'm not sure. That might be because of the screen sharing.
I don't know.
Okay, so
I
Usually
don't know.
it comes
Usually
from
it comes from
not having the headphones,
having the headphones,
and the audio is just looping
and the
back
audio
into
is
the
just
mic.
looping back into the mic.
oh, I don't have in headphones.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, it's weird. Sorry about that. So, dun, 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 dun. So let's try. Okay, let's try something. In our second view controller, right? In this, instead of that, let's just do that. We're just going to set it as an empty string. We're not going to say that it's an NS string. And then let's do that. Simplify that. That way we don't have to worry about the different types in terms of Objective-C and Swift. Just simplify it. That's one thing too as well. With Swift, you don't actually have to type your variables. So in Objective-C, whenever you create a variable, you have to say what type it is, right? So you have to say NS in Objective-C, you would do something like this. So you do NS string and then pointer. If anybody's familiar with C, you're familiar with pointers. So you just have to do NS string pointer text and then at and then whatever text. So it's kind of verbose, and then you would have to have your semicolon. So that's the difference. This is the difference between. I think this is the difference between Swift and Objective-C. So in Swift, this is how you can create like a string pretty simply, but Objective-C, this is how you have to create a string, right? So we were adding an extra layer of complexity there. So let's just see if we can. So awesome. So separate. Great. So this will allow us to print out text. So let's see if we can just set the actual text without messing with the label at all, because the label seemed to be what was giving us that problem, right? So let's just say next view controller is going to equal text, and that will be text field dot text. Great. So let's try that. Great, and now you see that we passed that data between those different views. So you can see right here in our view controller, it let us know hello. And that's how you can pass data between your different views. So you can easily set a variable in one of your classes, and then once you create that destination view controller, set that variable, excuse me, set that variable within your class. Okay. So that, I think, gives you some good basics of basically understanding view controllers and how to pass data between them, how to initiate your view controllers, interact your UI labels with your code and the storyboard, connect the UI components to your code, and understand how to create different IB actions and outlets. And I think this is like a good, if you are trying to understand what are like the basics of creating some interactivity and creating an iOS application that goes between multiple views and such. I think this gives you a good aspect of that. So if there are any any questions about iOS or anything that we did, I am willing to take them now. I'm gonna actually now upload this to Dropbox so that everybody can play with the code themselves. Let me undo my screen sharing. Awesome. So now I am going to upload this to Dropbox, and send you all the link. But are there any questions now about, iOS or about what we did? And I'm willing to take them now.
So Swift seems like I haven't used. It seems somewhat similar to Java in that it builds on C and kind of adds its own objects on top of that. Would that be a good summary?
Yeah, I would say so. So the Swift, I think, is powerful because it does do something similar, right? It allows you to oh, there are questions over here. It allows you to kind of use the power from those other languages, right? So the powerful language C and Objective-C, it allows you to kind of build up on that, but then it does its own with a lot of simplicity, right? So us being able to just kind of initiate variables and have constant variables really simply and easily, it allows us to do that without worrying about kind of the verboseness of a language like C or Objective-C. We don't have to worry about pointers and such like that. So it just it makes it much easier. I think that's what makes it really powerful because it still has the power of those other verbose languages, but it's easier as a beginner to kind of learn it. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
So I noticed earlier you were mentioning using Dropbox. Is there just limited functionality using tools like Git or Bitbucket, or is that just kind of a preferred point for you?
Oh, I'm just using Dropbox so I can share the code with everyone. I could post it on GitHub if is that what people would like. That would be really cool as well. So let me know if you want it on GitHub or Dropbox. That works too. I love GitHub. I'm all for version control, so that's really cool. GitHub would be better. Awesome. I'll post that on GitHub then and link that to everyone. It would be really cool as well if people want to add to the tutorial as well. So create a pull request and we can do that, and we can keep doing that together and maybe create like a really cool tutorial beginner app.
Nice. Without turning this actually into like a podcast interview, just really quick, what got you interested in using Swift?
So for me, actually, it was really hard for me to start doing Swift just because I love Objective-C. It's weird. I actually love the verboseness of Objective-C, and I actually love C as well. So when I started learning Objective-C, it was just really fun, and I thought it was great. And when Swift came out, I was like, dang, like I just started with Objective-C and learned this, and now I have to learn a new language. But I think the great part of why I wanted to learn Swift is because it is much simpler. So I think the app development cycle with Swift would be a little bit faster, just because there's a lot of things that you don't have to worry about anymore. They take a lot of the verboseness out, and so it will be easier to understand the process, I think. So the app development cycle would be a little bit shorter, which would be great. As well as that, I know that Swift, everything is going to eventually migrate to Swift. So I think it's definitely, as an iOS developer, it's definitely important to learn because in the long run, everything will be on Swift. And I think that it does have like powerful capabilities. And I like the idea that you have the playgrounds. I think that's really cool that you can kind of learn and play around with Swift because you can just interact with it from the get. You don't have to worry about creating a whole application. You can just play and create different elements and see what your code actually is doing. I think that's a great way to kind of learn, and there's no way to do that with Objective-C. So Objective-C, you just kind of have to create an app and then learn the development cycle, learn how to interact with Objective-C throughout the entire process. But with Swift, you can just understand, go step by step. Oh, what is it like for me to create this little element, this button element, with the program, and then you could see the button pop up, and I think that's really cool. So I think the learning curve is like much less for Swift than it is for Objective-C. What are some good tools to get started with Swift? Definitely, I will. You know what? In the GitHub README. So I'm gonna create a whole GitHub now. I'm excited. So I'm gonna create the README. In the README, I'll put a bunch of resources. And my favorite resource is AppCoda. They have like the most amazing like tutorials that will go from start to finish on a whole application and teach you really how to actually make a whole app in the language, which is really cool. But I'll link to a bunch of different stuff in the README. So I'll share that in the Slack channel. I'm gonna create it like literally right after this. Any other questions?
All right, that's
I
it.
think that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I hope you like all learned something and enjoyed the tutorial, and feel free to like my post. Read my post too. And let me know. Feel free to ping me on Slack if you have any other questions, and I will Slack everyone the GitHub once it's up.
Awesome, and thank you very much, Kaya, for leading this discussion. Definitely great. I've never played around with Swift, and I will definitely say, looking at it, just because it's in Xcode, I think it does add a level of intimidation. But you made it seem very, very simple, and I think now I'm excited to take some of my projects and get working.
I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I will Slack soon with the GitHub.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining in. We are actually cutting a little bit short, but if you'd like to continue the discussion, we do have a Slack channel as well as our discourse on the Code Newbie site. And I would be more than happy to talk with any of you. We talk every day during the week, even though it is a Saturday discussion channel. And we talk about cool things like Swift as well as some of the other things, whether it's politics and code or anything else. And once again, I'm very excited that we're starting this, and I'm excited that we can actually bring in new developing languages like Swift into this. So without further ado, you guys have a great weekend.